Good morning, Noel. Noel, can you confirm, can you see the functional skills screen? If you can't access your microphone, if you can just put it in the chat. It's just I've got a message on my screen and I want to check you can see. Hello? Okay, we'll make a start. I hope you can hear me and you can see the screen, Noel. It's just you at the moment. Hopefully some more people will join us, but we'll make a start because it's after 9 AM now. Let me know if there's any issues at all with what you can see on your screen or with the sound as well. So this morning we are looking at constructing complex sentences. Our aims and outcomes, let's have a look at those. So by the end of the session, you should be able to state what clear, or you must be able to state what clear, concise and precise writing is, know the different formats for different document types, plan your writing and proofread your work. You should be able to try and use clear, concise and precise writing, know how much detail to use, know typical lengths of certain documents, and employ the above to achieve high quality of clarity and format. So, why is sentence structure important? At level 2, you're expected to use complex sentences accurately and consistently. So it's building on your ability to write simple and compound sentences that you were expected at lower levels of functional skills. So for level 2, as well as simple and compound sentences, we're adding complex sentences as well, and we'll look at that together. So don't worry if you need a bit of a refresher, we're going to look at that. Right, first of all, we're going to watch a video. If there's any problems with the video or the sound, just give me a shout straight away.
A complex sentence is a complete sentence with one or more subordinate clauses. The subordinate clause has a verb and a subject, but doesn't form a complete sentence on its own. On the main sentence for its meaning. Subordinate clauses begin with words such as although, if, after, when, and unless. If the subordinate clause appears before the main sentence, it usually has a comma after it. If it appears after the main clause, you'll generally not need a comma. subordinate clause can also appear in the middle of the main sentence. If the subordinate clause provides non-essential information, it's separated with a pair of commas. If the subordinate clause is essential to the understanding of the rest of the sentence, commas are not required. The clause is essential because we need to know which children are going on holiday.
To recap, a complex sentence is a complete sentence with one or more subordinate clauses. The subordinate clause can appear at the beginning of the sentence with a comma, or at the end of the sentence without. It can also appear in the middle of the sentence, with commas if it is non-essential, and without commas if it is essential to the understanding of the sentence.
Okay. So that's given us some information about how to structure a complex sentence. And let's look at identifying sentence types. So in the video, it talked about different types of sentences, and a simple sentence contains only a subject, a verb, and an object, and it makes sense on its own. It's generally a very short sentence. So there's an example there. I worked in a shop. Full stop's missing at the end. Apologies. But that's a simple sentence. Can anyone give me another example of a simple sentence? If you just want to unmute yourself, if you want to give an example. So it'd be good to have some contributions. So just a simple sentence. Can anyone give me an example? So we've got there, I worked in a shop. What's another example of a simple sentence?
John is a boy.
John is a boy. Is that what you
Yeah.
said? Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. John is a boy. Good. Simple sentence. I play football. Another example of a simple sentence. Good. A compound sentence is two simple sentences joined with a conjunction. So we've got an example here. I worked in a shop, but next month I start a new job in a leisure centre. So in a compound sentence, it's two simple sentences that make sense independently, and they've been joined with a conjunction. So other examples of conjunctions, this sentence uses but other examples and, so, or, because, and so on. So the conjunction is the word that joins the two sentences together to make one sentence. So we've got here, I worked in a shop. Next month, I start a new job in a leisure centre. If we got rid of the but and put a full stop after shop, both of those sentences would make sense on their own. But as we know, in writing, it's important to use a variety of sentence types. If we only ever use short, simple sentences, the writing would be very boring and very stilted. It wouldn't sound natural. It wouldn't sound interesting. So, a simple sentence, compound sentence, and a complex sentence has a main clause and one or at least one subordinate clause. So here our example, after I left college, I worked in a shop. So with a complex sentence, there is one main clause and that would make sense independently. So I worked in a shop. That's our main clause. It makes sense without the rest of the sentence. The subordinate clause is here, after I left college. On its own, that does not make sense. After I left college, doesn't make sense by itself. We need more information for that to make sense. Okay, so if we look at some more examples, simple sentence, I play football. A compound sentence, I play football and I am very talented. So I play football, I am very talented. They've just been joined together with and. And a complex sentence could be, due to my football talent, I am going to be a professional. So I am going to be a professional makes sense by itself. Due to my football talent, it's the subordinate clause because it needs the rest of the sentence to make sense. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So a simple sentence, as we have learnt, contains a subject, a verb, and an object. And it makes sense on its own. So here we've got the same example. I works in a shop. I is the subject of the sentence. Worked is the verb. And shop is the object. So it's very simple. Compound sentence. So I works in a shop, but next month I start a new job in a leisure centre. So we have got our, just hold on. So we've got I worked in a shop, that's our first simple sentence. But is our conjunction there. Next month I start a new job in a leisure centre. So both of those sentences would make sense by themselves, but we've turned it into a compound sentence by using the conjunction but. Does anyone have any questions about compound sentences? Okay. So, oh, sorry. Right, so identifying sentence types. So, can you identify whether it's a simple sentence or a compound sentence? Just a minute, what's happened here? Excuse me one moment. Okay, sorry. So this should be a complex sentence. There's an error here at the top in the title. That should read complex. So after I left college, I worked in a shop. So this is, I'm just going to type that in. So this should be a complex sentence. The subordinate clause needs the rest of the sentence to make sense. So after I left college, on its own, that does not make sense. What happened after you left college? We don't know. We need more information. I worked in a shop. So that's the main clause because it makes sense on its own. I worked in a shop. That's fine. That would make sense on its own. So does anyone have any questions about complex sentences? So here, is it a complex sentence, a simple sentence, or a compound sentence? So the cafe was busy. Is that simple, compound, or is it complex?
Simple.
Good. So, simple.
Yeah.
I'm just going to write them here.
Papa.
Just to remind you.
You'll be fried now.
Make a time then if I clarify me. I thought you were gonna clarify by.
Okay, so just put those at the top to remind you. So simple sentence, it's just a short sentence, makes sense on its own. Compound, it uses a conjunction, such as and, but, so, or, because, and so on. Complex, there's a main and subordinate clause. So well done. The first one is simple. So the second sentence. Although the cafe was busy, the waitress managed to serve all the customers. So simple, compound, or complex.
Complex.
Excellent. It's complex. We can spot there's no conjunction, there's no and in the middle or but or so on. It's complex. We've got the main clause. The waitress managed to serve all the customers. And we've got the subordinate clause, although the cafe was busy. So that wouldn't make sense on its own. It needs the rest of the sentence to make sense. Good. Well done. The cafe shuts at 5 p.m. Simple, compound, or complex? So is it simple? Is it just a clause on its own? Is it compound using and, but, so, and those conjunction words? Or is it complex with a main and subordinate clause? The cafe shuts at 5 p.m.
Simple.
Simple, good. Well done. The cafe was busy because the cakes were very popular. So what type of sentence is that? The cafe was busy because the cakes were very popular. So how is it a simple sentence?
What?
Go on. So is it simple? The cafe was busy because the cakes were very popular. Does that look like a simple sentence?
No.
No. So it must be one of the other two. Does it use a conjunction? And, so, but, because?
Yeah.
Yes. It's in the middle. And do the two clauses either side of the conjunction make sense by themselves? The cafe was busy. The cakes were very popular. Yes. So that must be a compound sentence.
Compound. Okay.
Okay. The cafe shuts at 5 p.m. What type of sentence?
Simple.
Simple. Good. We've just got one clause that makes sense by itself. And the cafe, which is on the main square, shuts at 5 p.m.
Complex.
Excellent. Complex. So we've got our main clause, the cafe shuts at 5 p.m. It's been split in this example by the subordinate clause, which is on the main square. Okay, but it is, as you've said, a complex sentence. Complex sentence and subordinate clauses. So this example is a complex sentence. The cafe, which is on the main square, shuts at 5 p.m. The main idea of the sentence is called the main clause, so it makes sense on its own. The cafe shuts at 5 p.m. That's the main clause. The additional information is called the subordinate clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. So in this example, the subordinate clause is which is on the main square. If a subordinate clause splits the main clause, you will need 2 commas to show where the boundaries are. So our main clause, as you can see here in the grey boxes, the main clause is at the start and at the end of the sentence. The cafe shuts at 5 p.m. And we've separated that from the subordinate clause with commas. The cafe, comma, and then we've got our additional information, which is on the main square, and then another comma, shuts at 5 p.m. Okay. So we're going to read these sentences and identify the main and subordinate clauses. So the first example, before opening the cafe, Hannah empties the bins. So remember, the main clause makes sense on its own. The subordinate clause needs the rest of the sentence to make sense. The subordinate clause does not make sense on its own. So before opening the cafe, is that the main clause or the subordinate clause?
Subordinate.
Excellent. Okay, it doesn't make sense on its own, does it? Before opening the cafe, well, what? Before, what happened before? What? Who's involved in this? We don't know, so we need more information. So good, that's the subordinate clause, which means Hannah empties the bins is our main clause. Hannah empties the bins, that could be a sentence on its own, and we wouldn't need further information for it to make sense. Good. Hannah owns the cafe, which is always busy. So Hannah owns the cafe. Is that the main or subordinate clause?
The main clause.
Good. It makes sense on its own, doesn't it? Which means which is always busy is the subordinate clause. So we've already got a clue here on this one. Hannah, who runs the cafe, needs to hire more staff. So what's the main clause and what's the subordinate clause? You can see in this sentence the use of the commas, the main clause has been split. So can anyone tell me what the main clause is? Pardon? Hannah, good. So that's the start of it. What's the rest of the main clause? Hannah. So we can see it's been split. I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. The sound's not great. So if we've split the main clause, that's a big clue for us that this is not the rest of the main clause. So Hannah needs to hire more staff is our main clause. So those commas indicate to us that it's been split, which means this bit in the middle is our subordinate clause. So Hannah needs to hire more staff. That makes sense on its own, but we've got some more information here, our subordinate clause, who runs the cafe. Who runs the cafe wouldn't make sense by itself, it's additional information. So it's our subordinate clause. Oh, sorry. And we've got our final sentence here. Matthew, who is in college, has a part-time job at the cafe. So what's our main clause in that sentence? So again, we've got commas. which indicate the main clause has been split. So who can tell me what the main clause is in that sentence?
Matthew has a part-time job
Good.
at the cafe.
Excellent, thank you. Matthew has a part-time job at the cafe. Good. So that's a split main clause. And our subordinate clause is who is in college. So it gives us more information about Matthew. Matthew, who is in college, has a part-time job at the cafe. So who is in college is our subordinate clause. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So why do we use complex sentences? So in your functional skills assessment for level 2 writing, you'll get marks for showing that you can write complex sentences. So they're good for explaining things precisely and in detail. So by adding subordinate clauses in those complex sentences, you add more detail. You can be more precise. Good writers form complex sentences to combine ideas and make their writing more interesting and effective. So we've got an example here from a complaint letter. I was disappointed. The goods I had paid for failed to arrive on time. So we've got two separate sentences there, and then it's been put into a complex sentence. I was disappointed when the goods I had paid for failed to arrive on time. So it's combining the ideas and making the writing sound more interesting. So as I mentioned previously, if we always just wrote with simple or compound sentences, our writing would sound very unnatural, disjointed. It wouldn't sound interesting. So complex sentences, we can add detail and we can make our writing more effective, more interesting. So the third reason, they can be used to stress importance. So when one idea is more important than another, you can put the most important one last, so the reader remembers it best. So an example here with the same ideas from the previous sentences. After paying for next day delivery, I was devastated that the goods failed to arrive on time. Okay, so they're using that complex sentence for effect in the complaint letter. So they want it to have an impact on the person who is reading it. Okay. So before we start the quiz at the end of today's session, does anyone have any questions about complex sentences? Okay. So what is a complex sentence? A sentence that makes sense, two sentences joined with a conjunction, a sentence that contains a subject, a verb and an object, or a sentence with a main and at least one subordinate clause. So can anyone have a go? What's a complex sentence?
A sentence that makes sense.
So it will make sense, a complex sentence, or it definitely should make sense, but that's not a full description of what it is. So you're not wrong, it will make sense, but there's an answer there that's got more detail to describe exactly what a complex sentence is.
I think it's D.
It is, yes, it's D. So a complex sentence has a main clause and at least one subordinate clause. Well done. So two sentences joined with a conjunction, that's a compound sentence, two sentences put together, and a subject, verb and object is a simple sentence. So at level 2 writing, you need to be able to form simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, or all of those. So when you're doing your level 2 writing assessment, do you need to use simple sentences? Should you have some simple sentences in your writing?
Yes.
Yes. Should you have some compound sentences?
Yes.
Yeah. And complex sentences? Yes.
Yes.
So it's all of those. So as mentioned already, we want to make our writing interesting and effective. And just using one sentence type doesn't do that. We need to be using all of those sentence types to make our writing effective. A sentence with a main clause and a subordinate clause is known as a difficult sentence, a compound sentence, a simple sentence, or a complex sentence. So it's what we've been looking at today.
Yeah.
D. Yeah.
D. Complex sentence.
Good. It's a complex sentence. Well done. So compound sentence uses a conjunction. So conjunctions are words such as and, but, so, or, because, and it uses one of those words to join two simple sentences. Okay. So ideas, I'm not sure if this is, yeah. So ideas in a paragraph should all relate to one idea, should have enough detail, or should fit together logically. So this is something from, I think this is just something from a previous session just to quiz you on remembering other ideas that we have studied. So let's have a look.
D.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a main clause can't make sense on its own, always has a comma, can make sense on its own, or should come first. So the main clause, so remember we're looking at complex sentences, that's been our focus today. It's a main clause and a subordinate clause. So the main clause can't make sense on its own, always has a comma, it can make sense on its own, or it should come first.
A.
So B always has a comma. So if you cast your mind back to the video and we were told that that we don't always need a comma. So if the information that's added in the subordinate clause is needed for our understanding, then it wouldn't use a comma. But
As our thing is C.
yes, so it can make sense on its own. So they do often have a comma after the main clause, but not always. And sometimes there's more than just that comma, because if you remember, we looked at when the main clause is sometimes split. But C, yes, so the main clause will always make sense on its own. So it doesn't need anything else for it to make sense. And a subordinate clause doesn't make sense on its own. can appear at the beginning, middle or end of a sentence, it gives extra detail, or is it all of those things? So is A correct? A subordinate clause doesn't make sense on its own. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Where can it appear in the sentence? Can it go at the beginning, the middle, or the end?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, it can. And it gives extra detail, so we know that. So it's all of those things. A subordinate clause is all of those things.
All of them, yeah.
Well done. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about complex sentences? Remember, if you log in to Moodle, which you should have a login for, if not, you can contact the office to ask for that. And when you log in, you'll be able to see the courses you're studying, and there's extra supporting materials there, so you can do some practice of what we've looked at today in this session. As well as that, if you just you could spend a few minutes now or another time this week practicing writing some of those different sentence types. There's lots of help online. BBC Bite Size is really good for looking at things like sentence types. You can Google that and sentence types and it'll bring up some information. Also,
excuse me, what did you say? BBC?
Bite Size. So it's not based on functional skills. It is more for, say, GCSE English and other levels of English in school. But for things like sentence structure, there'll be some good examples there to help you just recognise the different types so that you can use them yourself. So BBC Bite Size is the education part of the BBC website, and it has loads and loads of information on there which could help with reading and writing. So just if you just put sentence types in or put complex sentences and search for that, then it would give you some examples. Okay, and also I know we're on our writing session today, but I would recommend when you're reading anything at all, we all read every day, whether it's in our work or in our reading the newspaper or a website or social media, just try and identify the different sentence types that writers are using, just because if you can identify them, then you can use them yourself. So it's just good whilst you're reading anything just to have a look at those different sentence types. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay. So thank you for attending today and for your contributions, and I will be with you next week. So have a good week, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.